Hello, this is Andrew. I've been teaching again today, and that's been my job for, since 1997, so I obviously like it. I was thinking about my experience when I first qualified and what I did and what I've tried to do ever since, really. So I thought if you were just newly qualified, it might be interesting to hear some ideas about, what people do to continue developing. Because the truth is that the Celta or Tesol course is really very much just the beginning. It's enough knowledge it's like a field kit, when you get out there, unpack it and try and make it work wherever you go. But until it's actually become embodied practice on a regular basis, it's very much a sort of an initial level of input that needs to be fleshed out in the real world, really. What I went on to do straight away was I tried to learn all of the grammar basically every time I taught something in a course book. I tried to commit it to memory, so understanding all the tenses, understanding what all the modal verbs are, all of the main sort of kind of grammar that you need to teach. That gave me confidence because I didn't feel that after 5 weeks I was a proper teacher, and that had to be kind of like developed on the road, really. Students basically want teachers who are grammatically competent, and even if it's just that we're 1 or 2 steps ahead of them or ahead of them in that lesson, that can be enough. But I think people can have a feeling that they're getting found out or not able to deliver properly if they don't know the language, and I think that's more or less fair enough, really. Teaching is obviously about learning about yourself as well. Standing up in front of 15 people or 20, 25 or more, and suddenly they're not listening or they don't understand, and it feels like it's a reflection on me, I'm not a good communicator, or it's a bad activity, or they don't like me. And that interaction with intention, will, the plan, and the reality, the dynamic, and what it brings up in the individual teacher, I think is quite interesting. And I actually believe that in order to do it well, I have to be committed to basically working on myself. And if I notice that I'm impatient or judgmental or don't treat groups equally, or I have bias, then I ought to find out what that is and work out how to change it. It's pretty illuminating, really, noticing how potentially flawed a teacher is, and knowing that whatever content is on the board or in the book, basically the biggest text that class is going to get in some ways is you, who you are as a person. It's sort of quite sobering, and I can even think of loads of things today where I've thought, well, I wouldn't really want to communicate that to younger people as in like, this is what the human race is like or should be like, but I have, and so I am going to continue to try and work on all that. A few more sort of practical sort of things: a list of good websites, grammar practice websites, like the British Council's website. Get some good listening websites, ESL Lab, and there's numerous resources like this on the web, but to know where they are and start to think about when to deploy them in class, when to deploy them outside class is I think, good practice. I've always found one of the most interesting things about Tesol that it's a space where theory can be applied directly. So understanding how theory informs practice, I think, is really important for the teacher, and it can keep it interesting. If you think about it like this, that learning, i.e. your students learning or anyone learning, is a process of becoming, and we're here and we're kind of trying to motivate them to learn and to become something. Then if I'm not involved in that process, I don't have that actual raw energy to transmit the kind of impetus I can provide to them in order to say, hey, you learn something and you become something, but I'm not doing that. It's not going to work. So being involved in the whole sort of field of thinking about theory and classroom practice, being a reflective practitioner and thinking about has worked well and what has not worked well, and constantly kind of working on that and trying to improve that, I think is really important. And if we can communicate a personal dynamic that we're involved in this becoming process, it sort of feels like it carries the whole thing forward, and students take it more seriously. You're going somewhere potentially together. It can be exciting to say, I've just worked out how to do this, or I'm going to try this, or let's do this and let's record some, give me some feedback on it, and then think about, how to move it forward. Initial certification is just the beginning, and after a year or 2 years, start thinking about the Delta, the other diploma level qualifications. These are huge headaches. They're unbelievable amount of work. Master's level sort of content, but not as large as a master's, but definitely a kind of cut-off point for professional development. And so, like, if you do this for a few years and you're like, I'm going to carry on doing this, you're going to find it sooner or later, and you're going to have to do it. And just do it. All the people I've worked with in really good centres, really proper, teachers embodying the profession. They're not just going to a corner of the world to go and get drunk and have fun as a TEFL teacher, although perhaps they've done that a bit, But I'm talking about people who are really dedicated to it. Most of them have done the diploma, or they're going to. That's not to say there aren't really good teachers who haven't done it, but sooner or later, if the opportunity comes up, I think you've got to do it, really. Think about master's level qualification as well. You can start involving action research and theoretical research in your practice as well. It keeps it interesting. In a way, the diploma is sort of like saying, have you got all of the language knowledge that you need? Can you apply it in different settings? Can you show that you can pick methodology and devise programs to suit people? And it's a whole lot more than that, but don't stay mystified. Start thinking about it and start looking at it. This is a bit of a left field one maybe, but as a monolingual, I do speak some bits of other languages, but basically I've always been employed as a native speaker, and because I've got, because I sound English, and because, schools want native speakers and that kind of thing, or because I've been working in the UK where it's been state-based education, ESOL or whatever. I think I need to have some humility about that and recognise that I've got a bit of an advantage based on the function English plays in the global system of power relations, and if at all possible, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. The solution, we might all disagree on that, but I think the thing I need to be aware of is that given the great advantage that one has as a native speaker, if you're in that category, then we just ought to have some humility, really. Try and learn the language wherever we go, recognise the resources the students have in their other languages, and try to live up to the belief that's been placed in us, really. Bilingual, monolingual teachers, trying to bring in those other languages as much as can and use them as resources. And there's a bit of resistance to that in some areas of ELT, and that's partly because some groups, especially sort of homogenous groups, might feel a bit uncomfortable speaking English as amongst themselves, and obviously that's a problem. But to then ignore the whole of the students and your language resources, that wouldn't seem to be the whole solution to that, really. And so I think that's an area that we can definitely think a bit more about. Getting up to date with the technology in education and in ELT in general, I think, is a really good idea. There's things like Flipgrid and all kinds of virtual learning platforms like Edmodo. Microsoft's one Teams, Google's got one Classroom. There's so much stuff, making interactive exercises, encouraging students to make videos or using WhatsApp as part of your practice. And basically, if it's happening in the world and it's not happening in our classrooms, if our classrooms seem like a generation or more than one behind, I think that will encourage students to feel that education is something that, you know, needs to be separate. And really, education and becoming and learning about who we are and learning what the world is like, it's not different from your life. It is your life, you know. And that's something I try and encourage now. You know, if you think about this as something you do in class, you know, you're not really going to get it. I mean, if this isn't allowing you to develop, you know, a knowledge and a model of what the world is like, you know, what the language is like, what the world is like, what the culture is like, you know, what reality is like, then it's pointless, really. And you know, I think technology and, you know, having a lot of tools that reflect contemporary state of culture and cultural practices is another way of saying this is life. You know, this isn't just us stuck in a classroom. Life, development, becoming, you know, the main stuff, the important stuff. So, I mean, look, ELT, I mean, I don't think it's made anyone rich. I mean, even coursebook writers, you know, you meet them here and there, you know, Tesol or other conferences, and they're very high-level professionals, and we've got coursebook writers here, and, you know, they're not rich. Sorry. I mean, maybe before in the old days, if you got points on the deal or whatever, or if you're a teacher trainer, or if you're in EAP, or if you're an applied linguistics professor, which is sort of like the top of where we can go, I suppose. None of them are rich, but the thing is, you know, where we're getting our rewards, we're doing a job we love, we're on the front line of theory and practice, there's endless opportunities for creativity, personal development, and developing other people who all have value and all ought to, you know, have the opportunities to become who they can be. And if the financial side is sort of somewhat more limited compared to other professions, the rewards in other areas are absolutely huge. And we've got people here, believe it or not, even older than me, who've been in ELT a long time. And look, we're still doing it because there's that moment where the theory becomes something creative, becomes a relationship with learners, becomes your goal and their goal, and the whole thing, you move it forward, and the classroom, that's where the magic happens. And, you know, it isn't boring. I'm not bored of it. It is a bit tiring, but, you know, congratulations on starting your career, and, you know, I wish you all the best. Put any comments you want here, and if you want advice on websites, you're not sure about that, you can ask questions. I'll definitely have a look at that. And thanks for watching this, and good luck.